Thank you, Karen, and thank you to everyone for attending. I know what it's like with busy lunches, and I'm hoping you're enjoying some pork on your fork there, which is great. I will acknowledge the traditional owners on the land in which we meet today, and I'd like to give a shout out to the sponsors. I know how important it is to have sponsors involved in events like this, so FTI and UNE, thank you for getting on board for today. All right, so thank you for the opportunity to be here today on behalf of Australia's 2,700 pork producers and our sector's 36,000 employees and all their families driving their livelihoods from our $5.3 billion industry. Australian Pork Limited is an industry-owned organisation. We promote sustainable growth across the Australian pork industry's entire supply chain by overseeing an integrated marketing and innovation programs, as well as research and development and initiatives and policy initiatives for the whole industry. Compared to other representative structures in other agriculture sectors and in the context of the RDC review that the federal government's currently undertaking, our structure is unique and means APL is well placed to be agile and responsive representative body that our industry needs, especially in times like these. African swine fever will feature prominently in our discussions today, of course, and rightly so, given its threats to Australia's pork industry and Australia's agriculture sector. But first, given today's forum is focused on rural communications and agribusiness, I want to talk about our industry's engagement with the public in terms of accountability and transparency. Australia's pig industry has been scrutinised publicly for many years, sometimes in an extremely critical manner. We've embraced that scrutiny and we're proud of where our industry stands today. Producers must be commended for investing in new production and husbandry methods, making Australian pork an environmentally and ethically sustainable industry. Collectively, we've reduced our carbon footprint by 70% and reduced our water use by 80%. Producers are adopting technology to make further sustainability progress, including on-farm waste management and electricity generation. It's actually really cool. So we actually take pig manure, collect it, cover it, and we're making biogas and putting it back into our businesses. It's a really unique way of taking a waste and making it productive for our businesses and reducing our costs. I'll do that throughout, I'll digress, sorry, I'll ad-lib. Our animal welfare standards and outcomes, namely the way we manage the wellbeing of sows and piglets, is a journey we're proud of and one we will continue to advance. Australian pork producers demonstrate the highest level of animal biosecurity of any livestock industry in Australia. So much depends on our disease-free status in terms of our production capacity, our market access, and our reputation with consumers. By demonstrating the progress, we're driving the value we add to Australia's rural economy. We enjoy widespread support across the community and in government. Equally, we've built an increasingly positive rapport with consumers as between July 2011 and June 2019, pork consumption for dinner has grown by 2.5 kilos per Australian, making pork the fastest growing mainstream meat. The volume growth has been driven largely by the producer levy funded Get Some Pork on Your Fork advertising executed in major cities. The support we've earned is pivotal because all our progress, growing investment and economic value is now at stake. So as I made it clear in my appearance at Senate estimates earlier this week, the estimated economic cost of African swine fever reaching Australia is $2 billion. And I'll refer to it as ASF. An ASF outbreak in Australia would be devastating. For our producers and supply chain employees, the lasting financial, social and emotional devastation would be akin to the worst kind of natural disaster. Here in New South Wales, where farmers and rural communities remain so crippled by drought, no one needs reminding about how fickle the fortunes of agriculture can be, regardless of whether the threat comes in the form of climate, market volatility or biosecurity risks. So what exactly is African swine fever? African swine fever is a highly infectious virus that affects both domestic pigs and feral pigs. The virus kills pigs within a few days of infection after triggering pneumonia, skin ulcers and swollen joints. So it's a really painful way for these animals to die. I have to be clear, humans and other animals cannot be infected. This is an impact on the pig industry. The virus only affects pigs and is different from the swine flu. So I often hear people call it African swine flu. It's African swine fever, impacts only the pigs. African swine flu, or the H1N1 virus, which can infect humans. So they're very different. African swine fever is an animal welfare issue and will devastate livelihoods. African swine flu, however, is the one that can be transferred to humans. African swine fever spreads when uninfected pigs come into contact with infected pigs, pork products, soft ticks, or other organic material that holds the virus. The virus was first discovered in the 1950s on the African continent, and outbreaks have occurred consistently since then. Countries with historical outbreaks, such as Portugal and Spain, have managed to eradicate the disease. However, that process has taken several decades. We're talking 30 years and a full depopulation of the herds and starting again. So it's not just there is no vaccine for this virus. The difficulty of eradication is largely due to that fact there is no vaccine. And no one has been able to formulate one, despite ongoing efforts. And we heard the other day that China has diverted every lab to focus on the virus, and we're not any closer. Last year represented a critical turning point. The virus swept into Europe, with over 10 countries confirming cases of the virus just last year. The subsequent spread into China alone is expected to result in the destruction of 350 million pigs, and that's 25% of the world's total pig population. The closest case to Australian shores was confirmed in Timor-Leste in the past month. So if you're wondering why it's suddenly on the radar, we sort of had a little bit of complacency that it was over in China and wasn't getting close to Australia, but with the incursion in East Timor, it's a very quick flight. It's only 650 kilometres away. Sorry. The spread of the virus has also been confirmed elsewhere in Southeast Asia this year, including the Philippines, Myanmar, Vietnam, Laos and Cambodia. And yes, pigs infect other pigs, but humans are to blame for much of the disease global spread. So if you're wondering why it's spreading so quickly, unfortunately it's humans. Humans are the responsible. And that's because while pigs can't fly, infected pork products certainly can. The rapid spread of the disease throughout Asia highlights the severity and potency of ASF. Its spread to the Philippines and East Timor is likely to have come from travellers on commercial airlines. ASF can remain active in meat products, clothing, equipment and vehicles, and is easily spread through poor biosecurity and swill feeding. Infected pork products being sent via mail to Australia or travellers bringing in infected products to Australia represent our biggest risk. Needless to say, Australia has banned the importation of live pigs, pig genetic material and uncooked pig meat, and we did that quite a long time ago. Cured meats have also been prohibited from ASF positive countries now. Australian Border Force personnel have doubled their efforts to detect pork products being brought or sent into the country in luggage or via mail. There's been increased scrutiny of passengers and parcels arriving from ASF-affected countries with a heavy focus on China. These include inspections of shoes of passengers that reporting having visiting agriculture areas. So we're even targeting people who went hiking in areas that are ASF affected because this virus is so deadly. It lives for 36 days without a host and lives for, so far we're tracking 6 years in frozen products, maybe longer. So it doesn't actually need to be on a pig. It can be on your footwear. So if you come back in and go near a piggery, you can actually be the carrier. That's why this one's so deadly. There's been increased biosecurity messaging and inspection at all airports. Government is engaging with Australian embassies overseas, international students, migration agents, e-commerce platforms, airlines, airports and more in an effort to raise awareness of the ASF risk. Australian officials are also intervening at regional transport hubs such as Singapore and Hong Kong to intercept passengers on indirect flights from ASF-affected countries. This increase in targeted biosecurity testing represents a crucial step in the front line in this fight. And it really does come back to, if we get it here, it will decimate our industry. So we have to keep the fight up to keep it out. Australian Pork Limited also welcomed the news that biosecurity dogs have been dispatched to Darwin in an effort to pick up any infected animals and products. And I can actually report that Suki, that went to Darwin only about a week and a half ago, has already detected products. And they've fined an international student for bringing that in just last week. Concurrently, the Australian Government is funding projects to raise awareness of serious animal diseases in our northern neighbours, including East Timor, Indonesia and Papua New Guinea. This will help local authorities quickly identify, report and contain outbreaks. Federal Government also significantly increased penalties for bringing in undeclared meat products, including visa cancellations. We actually welcomed the deportation of a Vietnamese woman who was caught carrying more than 4.5 kilos of pork products. She actually had 10 kilos of meat products in her bag, which I just find amazing. She had seafood, eggs, pork products, uncooked. I just can't fathom what would make someone put that in their suitcase, let alone the smell. So I wouldn't have wanted to be sitting anywhere near her. This is the first time a passenger had their visa cancelled under the strict new laws. And the woman in question is not allowed back in for 3 years. So sends a pretty strong message. The incident drew international media attention and sent a strong message to travellers, showing that Australia won't tolerate people putting our environment, industries, economy and families' livelihoods at risk. Similarly, Australian Pork Limited strongly endorsed the court findings in WA in August, which found a WA pork business and 2 individuals guilty of deliberate and long-term biosecurity breaches by way of illegally importing semen into shampoo. And I will slightly digress there. I started with APL on the 1st of August, and on day 9 I was sitting in a courtroom in WA with people going to jail for illegally importing genetics, so boar semen, in shampoo bottles in their carry-on baggage. That's a pretty big initiation into your new job. Just saying. And no, I don't use that in my hair. In case you're wondering. This is all natural. It won't happen overnight. Yep. And it won't help your hair come back, sorry. So, similarly... Sorry, I did tell you I'd digress, sorry. There is significant collaboration. Do you know people do ask me that joke? They think they're really funny. Oh, how's your hair? What are you washing it with? Yeah, move on. So there is significant collaboration taking place between industry and government agencies and the Biosecurity Roundtable in Canberra in September, convened by our new Agriculture Minister, Bridget McKenzie. This has all been instrumental in raising awareness, but also, most importantly, getting our readiness. We've taken that risk of biosecurity to a whole new level, which I personally would like to see as the norm. This alignment, including the imperatives of overcoming cross-jurisdictional overlap between the states and agencies, means we are now better placed than we were even just a month ago in terms of securing our national biosecurity. The collaboration of agencies and industry groups has given us an opportunity to strengthen our border biosecurity measures, not just for ASF. And I need to make it really clear, yes, they've been finding fragments of ASF in those products. They've also been finding fragments of foot and mouth disease. So it's amazing what they're finding, and with Australia's biosecurity, we're all reliant on it. It's really scary. So in relation to foot and mouth, just to give you a bit of context, the estimated economic cost of foot and mouth coming here, the recovery is $50 billion because it impacts every livestock industry. So there is no telling which agriculture disease may be present in illegally imported products. A seized suitcase removes a risk for all of Australian agriculture industries, which is a $60 billion industry with aims to grow it to $100 billion. A step up of biosecurity measures means we're now better able to protect not just the pork industry, but all livestock industries. APL is playing a leading role in strengthening national biosecurity measures because we're at the front line of this particular battle, and we're determined to continue to play a leading role. From an on-property perspective, producers know the farm gate is the last line of defence in their fight against ASF. With fragments of the virus detected in a large number of products seized at the borders, farmers also know our nation's first line of defence will never be foolproof safety net. And I do have to say, in 6 months, they found 27 tonnes of illegally imported pork products. So it's not just one little beef jerky or pork jerky. It's, 27 tonnes coming in people's luggage or in the mail. On-farm biosecurity measures, which already represent best practice, are now at unprecedented levels. And it's no surprise that producers are so determined to secure their farms, their pig herds and their families' livelihoods. In the event of an outbreak, there is a process to determine what actions will be taken. Plans are formulated locally where an outbreak might occur, then referred to state-established animal disease emergency response. Whilst an option during response, a national standstill for all pig movements is not mandatory under the existing plan of an ASF outbreak. However, how widely pig movements are restricted actually depends on those individual circumstances. The necessity and scale of a product recall will be decided by the committee established during the response. So I have to reiterate, you can eat the pork. It does not impact humans, but it's more about the spread of the virus would be why we'd be looking at recall. An outbreak scenario exercise is going to take place in the coming weeks, so we've worked really hard to get the governments and states to take this seriously, and it will be repeated. It's in December, and it will be repeated with all stakeholders in early 2020. The Department of Agriculture is also making plans for responses in the event that ASF appears in our large feral pig population, and is working with the Northern Territory states, including the Torres Strait officials. In the Torres Strait, there is a largely unregulated flow of people and animals between PNG and North Queensland, and this has been identified as a biosecurity risk. So just to put it into context of the feral pig population, the domestic herd at any one time is about 2.5 million pigs, 5 million pigs annually. We estimate the feral pig population is somewhere around 24 million, and it's national. And the key issue is that no one really has overarching responsibility for it. Everybody assumed with a drought that numbers would go down. They haven't. They've gone up. They destroy our environment. They destroy our wildlife. They impact every agriculture business. We've seen impacting the banana industry. They've been attacking lambs. So feral pigs are a huge issue. So if you hear feral pigs on the radar, it's actually something we are really passionate about. And this week I actually even got to use the word bounty, bounty on a feral pig, which is, something I didn't think I would be again saying in the job. But when, we need to take this seriously and we need to do something. So specific opportunities for feral pigs include developing a control strategy equivalent to the wild dog action. So I'm assuming most people would realise half of our sheep industry was almost destroyed because of wild dogs. And for anyone who hasn't seen the wild dogs, we're not talking your little pets in the backyard. These are pretty scary, over-the-top large puppies on steroids, big teeth, very, very scary, and they hunt in packs. Establishing pigs, recommending that pigs actually be established as a pest of the national significance under the Australian Pest Animal Strategy. Identifying a national feral pig management coordinator, which we're pushing for, and community and social research around how farmers and hunters can deal with pig movements. And again, I don't expect to be on the front of Boar and Babes magazine anytime soon with the pig hunters, but we certainly are working very closely with them. Okay, so from a global market perspective, the spread of ASF is causing major disruption in the supply of pork and other dietary proteins. Pork accounted for about 37% of meat production globally in 2018, and China accounts for half of that. The latest estimates indicate China's pork production will decline by at least 20% as a result of the ASF losses. This sort of disruption to global meat supply has not occurred before, so we are certainly in uncharted waters. It is expected this shortfall in pork supply will see pig meat supply substituted for poultry, beef and seafood, and put upward pressures on prices of all meat categories. And for those of you who know I've come out of the cattle industry, no, I haven't come into the pork industry to boost beef sales in China. just adding that. Upward pressure on prices does sound like good news, but Australian pork production costs are actually really high and producer margins are already being squeezed by higher grain prices triggered by the drought. Our meat processing costs are already comparatively high, so internationally prices would need to increase quite substantially to make Australian pork competitive in a global market impacted by ASF. APL does see this as an opportunity for industry though, particularly in relation to ham and bacon domestically, but also international markets where food safety and clean green image is highly valued. And I'll just point out, 80% of the ham and bacon products you buy on a supermarket shelf are not Australian pork. So majority of that is imported and imported from the US or Europe. So 80% of what's on the shelves. So the country of origin labelling that government has rolled out is really important for our industry. The higher the percentage, the more likely that you're buying Australian pork. So all the ham in the deli need to start to read those labels, because as an informed consumer, I thought I was buying Australian pork, not realising I wasn't. So some of those percentages are as low as 5 and 10%, which is actually just water to rehydrate those products. So when you go into your supermarkets, I'd like to encourage everyone to read the country of origin labelling and look for something 60% and above to guarantee that you're buying Australian pork and supporting Australian pork producers. It can be a little bit hard for someone like me who's only 160 centimetres tall. I did have to climb up the shelves and find it, which the Woolies staff were very concerned about what I was doing. But I'm sure the tall people in the room can reach those shelves, and for those, yes, just climb up the shelves, get there. All right, so I digress again. So there is some potential upside for Australian producers arising from this situation facing us, but no one can definitively forecast what lies ahead. So if I put it into context as well, we don't export to China. We don't have protocols for China to export Australian pork. We do go into Singapore, Japan, Korea, the Philippines, and we export about 10% of our market into those countries, but we don't go into China. Unfortunately, we've had protocols sitting on their desk the Chinese government's desk for about 4 years, and we were hoping this might be an opportunity to get access. But if I stay on that train of thought, if we sent our entire pork production to China, it would be eaten in 59 hours. So their appetite for pork is huge. So where we can fill though is that really clean, green niche market, and that's where we see the opportunities. I think Karen was sort of hoping I might go on to the beef slightly from the old hat. The beef industry has seen increase in beef sales over in China, as has chicken. So we're seeing a slight swap in China over to chicken and over to beef. So fingers crossed we can reset our own market and we can take some of that market access back. But our focus is very much on those third markets. So whereas everyone's going to redivert all their products to fill China, we'd like to be the ones that are the reliable, sustainable source for Singapore, even our own Australian domestic market. So regardless, APL is determined to keep this devastating disease away from Australian pig farmers, and we're grateful for the emphatic community and political support producers are receiving in this fight.